The old king's hands had stopped shaking 3 days ago, and everyone in the palace understood what that meant. A tremor was the body still fighting. Stillness was the body making peace. So when King Aldrich of Vale summoned his eldest son to the North Solar at an hour when no court business was ever conducted, the whole household held its breath, because they knew this was not a meeting. It was a handing over. Prince Corin came without his ceremonial chain. He had learned long ago that his father distrusted anything that announced itself. He found the old man seated not on a throne, but on a plain oak chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket the color of ash, watching the harbor lights of Vale flicker across the black water. For a long moment neither spoke. Corin had rehearsed 100 things to say and forgot all of them. "They think I called you here to give you the crown," Aldrich said at last, without turning. His voice had thinned but not weakened. "The crown is a hat, Corin. Any fool can wear a hat." Corin waited. His father had never rewarded interruption. "What I am giving you is harder to wear and impossible to take off." The king finally looked at his son, and Corin saw that the eyes, at least, had not surrendered anything. "For 40 years I have been the voice of this family. Not its power, its voice. When your uncle disgraced himself, it was my word that decided whether we buried the scandal or bled from it. When your sister married beneath the council's wishes, it was my voice that made the marriage a triumph instead of a shame. When your grandmother lay dying and the succession was uncertain, 3 houses looked to me to say who we were. I said it, and because I said it, it was true." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. Corin sat. "A king rules a country," Aldrich went on, "but every family, even a common one, even a poor one, has a single person who speaks for what it is, who decides in the moment that cannot wait whether the family chooses mercy or pride, whether it protects the weak one or sacrifices him. That person is never elected. He is simply the one the others turn to when the ground opens." The old king let the words settle. "I am giving you that, tonight. Before the crown, before the council, before the priests get their hands on any of it. Because the crown they will give you in daylight with trumpets. This they cannot give you at all. Only I can, and only once." Corin's throat was tight. "I don't know if I'm ready." "No one who is ready should ever be trusted with it," his father said. And for the first time in years, the old king smiled. Outside the North Solar, the palace steward pressed his ear to the door and heard nothing, and that nothing frightened him more than any argument would have. In 30 years of service, he had learned to read the silences of the House of Vale the way sailors read weather. A shouting king was a king who intended to go on living. A quiet one had already begun to leave. Corin emerged near midnight. He did not weep, which the steward noted, and he did not smile, which the steward noted more. He walked the length of the gallery the way a man walks who has just been told the exact weight of something and is testing whether his legs will bear it. At the far end he stopped before the portraits, his grandmother stern in her jewels, his great uncle who had ruined himself over a woman from the Southern Isles, the ancestors who had built Vale from a fishing town into a kingdom. He had passed these faces 10,000 times. Tonight they seemed to be watching back. By morning the household knew something had shifted, though no one could name it. When the youngest prince, Corin's brother Edrin, argued at breakfast that their father should be moved to the warmer southern estate for his health, it was Corin the servants glanced toward, not the physicians, not the queen mother. And when Corin said quietly that their father would remain in Vale because Vale was where he wished to die, the matter simply closed. No vote, no decree. The family had already begun, without ceremony, to turn toward its new center of gravity. This unsettled Edrin more than grief did. He caught his brother alone in the armory that afternoon, where Corin had gone to be somewhere no one would look for him. "You spoke for the whole family this morning," Edrin said. "Who gave you that right?" "He did," Corin answered, "last night. He gave you the throne, that succession. Everyone expected it." Corin shook his head slowly. "He didn't give me the throne. The throne comes later with witnesses. He gave me the other thing, the thing that has no ceremony." He struggled to explain what he barely understood himself. Edrin, when you were 9 and you broke the tribute vase and blamed the kitchen boy who decided the boy wouldn't be whipped. Edrin's face changed. Father. Father, not the king, the father, the one who spoke for what our family would be. Corin set down the old blade he'd been holding. That is what he handed me, not the power to command men. The duty to decide when there is no time to think what kind of family we are going to be. Edrin was quiet a long moment, and if you decide wrongly, then I will have to live inside the wrong I chose, Corin said, the way he lived inside his. That is the whole of it. That is the entire inheritance. He looked at his younger brother with something that was not yet authority but was no longer merely kinship. I did not ask for it, but it has been asked of me, and a thing asked of you is heavier than a thing you want. The old king lingered another 11 days, and each of them taught Corin something the crown could never have. On the third day, a dispute arrived from the eastern provinces, two noble houses on the edge of open feud over a stretch of grazing land, both demanding the king's judgment. Aldrich was too weak to hold audience. The council assumed the matter would wait for the coronation. Instead, Corin received the envoys himself, in the small receiving room without the trappings of state. He did not rule on the land. He asked each envoy a single question. What did their masters fear would happen if they lost? And in the answers, one house feared ruin, the other feared humiliation. Corin found the shape of a peace that a verdict never could have. He gave the land to the house that feared ruin and gave the public apology to the house that feared shame. Both went home able to tell their people they had won. The council called it luck. His father, when Corin described it that night, called it something else. You listened for what they were protecting instead of what they were demanding, the old king murmured. That is the whole art. Men rarely fight for what they say they fight for. He closed his eyes. You will do. On the 7th day, the hardest thing came. A letter arrived proving that Corin's late uncle, the one in the portrait, the disgraced one, had fathered a child years ago with the woman from the southern isles. The child was grown now, a fisherman's daughter who knew nothing of her blood, wanted nothing, claimed nothing. But the letter existed, and the council members who had seen it wanted guidance, bury it or acknowledge her. Burying it was safe. Acknowledging her was generous and dangerous. Corin sat with the letter for an entire day. He thought of his father's words, whether the family protects the weak one or sacrifices him. He thought of the kitchen boy who had not been whipped. Then he did the thing his father had prepared him for. He decided, and he owned the deciding. He sent word that the young woman would be quietly provided for, her privacy protected, her name never dragged into court, protected without being exposed, given without being used, neither buried nor paraded. A third path, the kind that only exists for someone willing to carry the cost of choosing it. When he told his father, the old king was too weak to open his eyes, but his hand found Corin's and pressed it once. That, Aldrich breathed, was the exam, not the land, this one. You could have hidden her to protect us or shown her to look righteous. You did neither, you protected her. A long, slow breath. You spoke for what we are, not what we look like. The faintest pressure again. I am no longer afraid to go. King Aldrich of Vale died on the 12th night, in the chair by the window, watching the harbor lights he had watched as a boy. He did not die on the throne. He had not sat on it in weeks. This detail, small as it was, became the thing the kingdom remembered, that their greatest king spent his final hours not as a monarch but as a father, finishing the one task that mattered more to him than any decree. The coronation came 6 weeks later, exactly as Aldrich had promised. Trumpets, priests, the weight of the ancient crown lowered onto Corin's brow before a cathedral full of witnesses. The crowds cheered. The bells of Vale rang until dusk. And Corin, kneeling to receive the thing everyone believed was the true inheritance, understood at last why his father had summoned him in the dark, weeks before, with no witnesses at all. Because the crown was public and therefore it was theirs, the people's, the councils, the churches. They could cheer it, question it, one day even resent it. But the other thing, the quiet thing handed over in the North Solar by a dying man in an ash-colored blanket, belonged to no one but the two of them. It could not be voted on or revoked. It had passed from father to son in a single sentence and a single pressed hand, and no ceremony on earth could add to it or take it away. That night after the feasting, Corin did not go to the throne room. He went back to the North Solar and sat in his father's plain oak chair and watched the same harbor lights. His brother Edrin found him there and, without being asked, sat in the second chair, the one Corin had sat in to receive the inheritance. "They're calling you the voice of the family now," Edrin said. "In the streets, I heard it." "I know. Does it feel like power?" Corin thought about the two feuding houses and the fisherman's daughter who would never know how close she'd come to being a weapon and an old man's hand pressing his in the dark. "No," he said. "It feels like being trusted with something breakable every single day." He looked at his brother. "One day it will pass to whoever the family turns to when the ground opens. It might be your child, it might be mine. We won't choose them. They'll simply be the one everyone looks toward." He turned back to the window. "All I can do is carry it well enough that it's worth handing on." Outside, the harbor lights burned on, the way they had for the old king, the way they would for whoever came after, steady, indifferent and quietly eternal, keeping their long watch over a kingdom that had, without a single trumpet, already chosen its new heart.